Good evening, good morning to those of you who are not in South Asia, but a very good evening to the rest of you. Dear friends and colleagues, thank you so very much for joining us today and a very warm welcome. We are here to discuss, I should introduce myself. My name is Priya Shamsundar, and I'm very glad to facilitate this book launch today. We are here, as you know, to discuss a set of issues that are very pertinent and topical because climate change is upon us. We're also here to think about the future and how we need to be forward-looking because we have to scale our efforts and change our expectations in order to adapt to climate change. The stock of carbon, we've already put it. I will repeat that because the recording just started. The stock of carbon we've already put into the atmosphere makes it incredibly important for us to start planning for a different future. The book we discussed today also raises issues that are very close to our hearts, I believe. I understand from the organizers that over 300 people signed up to join this Zoom call. No doubt some of you are here to listen to this fabulous lineup of speakers, and also because you are deeply concerned about adapting to climate change as you see it affecting our cities, our villages, and the lives of our children. But surely some number of you are here to honor Professor Karl-Göran Mahler's memory and his legacy, because you have somehow been touched by Karl and what he brought to many of us who worked for, trained, or did research under the SANDEE umbrella. I remember the first SANDEE book, Promise, Trust, and Evolution, about communitarian institutions in our region. A fabulous name, surely Pranab's brainchild, one of the co-editors of this current volume. I'm also honored to remember Dr. Narpat Jodha from ICIMOD, who was another editor. Professor Mahler and Dasgupta were instrumental in helping a group of us South Asians attend a writing retreat so we could launch that book. This first book was followed by a more prosaic, I would say, but hopefully useful, textbooky type of book, Environmental Valuation in South Asia. Professor Huck, one of the current co-editors, also edited that book. You see a pattern here. I picked up the cover of the book yesterday and was so glad to see Karl-Göran's imprint on the back cover. It says, and I cite, valuation of environmental resources is essential in designing socially desirable policies and so on and so forth. I wish I could mimic Karl's accent, but but I'm terrible at things like that. But perhaps Professor Madheshwaran is somewhere here amongst the audience, and many of you will know that he can do this very well. So if you see him, ask him to mimic Karl so we can remember him. There are many excellent speakers in the lineup for today's session who can speak to the merits of and the need for this new book, Climate Change and Community Resilience, that is being launched today. I can almost see Karl nodding his approval, particularly because it documents and applauds the diversity of approaches that are taken by communities to adapt to climate and the other changes that they constantly face. We face many challenges ahead, but frankly, this book makes me optimistic about the future. Why, you might ask? There's a lot to be concerned about. Because it brings together scholars from across South Asia to think deep and hard about how we can address these common challenges together. So there is reason for hope, which is absolutely essential for coping with the future ahead of us. So thank you all for joining us today, and let's move forward to the book launch. Mani, all yours.
Of my fellow co-editors, Professor Haq, Professor Mukhopadhyay, and Professor Shamin, I would like to welcome everybody for joining today. There is slight change in the agenda. Dr. Pema, DG of ICIMOD, couldn't join today because he's traveling outside the region. So Mr. Vasanta Shrestha, Director of Strategic Cooperation, kindly agreed to join. So the book will be joint launched by Professor Dasgupta and Mr. Shrestha. So after that, we'll have invited speakers from South Asian countries representing South Asia and beyond. After the remarks, we'll have 25 minutes or so of moderated Q&A sessions. So please share your questions, comments, remarks in the Q&A chat box, not the regular chat box. We'll not monitor the regular chat box, but you can type anytime your questions, comments, remarks in the Q&A chat box that we'll monitor and respond. So I'd check the timeline of the project that we started in 2019, and it was October 21st, exactly 2 years ago. And during these 2 years, all 4 editors met every week, making sure that we are making good progress. So we also had a very extremely cooperative our collaborators. So the book is just published today. So I'm very happy to share with you, and we'll share the link after some time. The book has 29 chapters covering stories of climate change and community resilience from all across South Asia. This is an open access volume that can be downloadable freely for anyone. And as you already know, this book is dedicated to Professor Carl Johan Meller, who, along with Sir Partha Dasgupta, spent many years of their time and energy effort to build a research capacity in South Asia. And you can see, this book is just one of the outcomes of the effort of years of investment in the region. So, and I believe that, this will continue in future. So I'd like to thank close to 60 plus contributors to the volumes who came on board and contributed. And once they committed, no one dropped out from the process. So that's a very good thing for any project. I'd like to thank Shara Aniyar, Priya Samsundar, Carl Folke, and Ernest Trophy for writing a piece separately in memory of Professor Meller. So you will see these things in the front matter of the book. And I also like to thank Professor Dasgupta and Dr. Pema for contributing forward for the book. And also I would like to thank Springer, who actually came on board for publishing the book. And they did right on time. Today it is published, sometimes a few hours ago. So I would also like to thank my colleagues from ICIMOD who actually helped us to organize this event, and also working very behind the scene, such Nisha, Sanita, Udayan, Reyes, and several others who actually did a very good job. Also Anohita Majumdar, she helped us for copy editing the book. And as we announced, in our announcement that we'll actually randomly picked up 10 registered participants and provide hard copies of books for 10 winners. So what that will do after the event, we'll select and we'll communicate through email. And the hard copy is not available yet. When it is available, we'll mail it to each, whoever wins the lottery. So with that, I would like to thank again for everybody for participating today. Supriya, over to you.
Thank you, Maniji. I think just to a couple of logistical issues. We will go through the agenda. We have a lineup of 12 fabulous speakers who will all restrict their comments to the times identified. But for those of you in the audience, you should feel free to start asking questions. We do have some time for Q&A at the end. Please, if you have questions, write them down as they occur to you in the Q&A box, not in the chat box, because we will not follow the chat box. We will only look at the Q&A box. So please write them down and as they occur to you, and we'll pick up as many as we can to ask our speakers to respond to. So thank you so very much. Mani, have I covered the logistics? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, Priya.
Yeah, okay. So I'd like to invite Professor Shamim to start the book launch. Should we ask Mr. Shrestha first to?
Either way is fine, Priya. You know.
Yeah, let's start with this, and then we'll have comments from Mr. Shrestha and Sir Partha.
Thank you, Priya. I'm Rumi Shamin, one of the editors of the book, and it's my pleasure and privilege to coordinate the launching of the book on behalf of my co-editors, Dr. Enamul Haq, Dr. Mani Nepal, and Dr. Pranab Mukhopadhyay, and also on behalf of more than 50 authors from 7 South Asian countries and beyond. Many of them are represented in the collage of photographs that you're looking at right now. The book is open access and is available on the Springer website as of today. I'm going to click the link to the book, which takes us to the Springer website that you see on the screen, and it has a download prompt which will allow you to download your own copy of the book. I would now like to request Sir Partha Dasgupta to formally declare the book launched.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to do this, to launch the book. And does this coincide with the few comments I'm supposed to make, or do I come later to do that?
That will come later, sir.
Okay, well, I declare that the book is published now. And congratulations.
Sir Partha Dasgupta. I would now also like to request ICIMOD Director of Strategic Cooperation, Basanta Raj Shrestha, to declare the book launched.
Thank you. Much to my delight, it is my great honor to announce the launch of Climate Change and Community Resilience book launched. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Basanta Shrestha. One closing comment is that we are thankful to SANDEE and ICIMOD for logistical support and for the funding of open access availability of this book. Thank you. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you, Rumi. So let's get going here. Namaste, Basanta ji. Very glad to have you here. And we're going to start with your opening remarks. And then Partha, we will follow that up with you. Thank you. So Basanta ji, you have about, I would say 10 minutes.
Okay. And thank you, Priya. And distinguished chief guest, Sir Partha Dasgupta, distinguished speakers, participants joining us in this very important milestone event. A very warm greetings to all and namaste from ICIMOD. On behalf of the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, it is my great honor and privilege to welcome you all to the virtual launch of the book titled Climate Change and Community Resilience, Insights from South Asia. with a mission for sustainable and resilient mountain development. Resilience for us at ICIMOD is the ability of communities and ecosystem to be prepared for shocks, recovered from shocks, and bounce forward to emerge stronger. Building community resilience is a prerequisite to achieve the SDGs in the Hindu-Kush-Himalaya. Thus, the development of simple, affordable, local solutions can go a long way to address the challenges arising from the complexity and dynamism of the fragile mountain ecosystem. Replication, scaling up of these solutions require a deepening as well as broadening of partnerships, institutional capabilities, and also policy engagement at multiple levels. Our work on ICIMOD's deep history of engagement with partners and a network like SANDEE and others is formulated to deliver strategic results, namely promote transboundary cooperation as a regional organization, meet capacity building needs in the region, support long-term testing, piloting, and monitoring of innovative approaches, as well as influence on mountain development policies. SANDEE, we are very proud to host at ICIMOD, an initiative of ICIMOD, and with its vibrant network and the guidance from eminent personalities such as Sir Partha Dasgupta and many others who are here today, I think have contributed towards the realization of this book, and which are also central to ICIMOD's work. I have no doubt that this book will add immense value to our ongoing work to build resilience of people and natural resource system in the mountains, hills, and the plains of the Hindu-Kush-Himalaya. For example, improving sustainable value chains and climate-smart agriculture, preparing natural resource management plans, reviving spring sets due to climate change impact on the hills that we see, commissioning early warning system, and piloting resilient mountain villages, among many others. As a regional intergovernmental organization, the regional cooperation is our key mandate, and we strive towards international community to unite and support mountain communities who face the most or the severe brunt of climate change impacts. In the run-up to COP26, together with ICIMOD member countries, we are launching the major campaign called SKS to Glasgow campaign to promote mountain voices and scale up investment in mountain-specific climate priorities, so as to amplify mountain agenda at the international platforms such as UNFCCC. The campaign takes forward the ministerial declaration and the SKS call to action that was unveiled last year in 2020 to foster climate resilient mountain communities, as well as pave pathways for increased investment flow for sustainable mountain development in the Hindu-Kush-Himalaya region. Dear distinguished participants, ICIMOD is committed to the process of knowledge generation and sharing with our key mission, and also with a focus on livelihood enhancement, sustainable resource management and its use, integrating indigenous knowledge and culture into innovative solutions that can bring lasting and positive impacts for the mountain communities. This book is therefore a timely publication that highlights local initiatives on climate change adaptation and resilience building in South Asia. Our big congratulations to 50 plus, I heard 60 numbers earlier, authors and editors who have made huge contributions to this book. We applaud the editors for dedicating to the memory of Professor Carl Goran Meller, one of the founder of SANDEE. With the collection of stories on how communities in the South Asia are building resilience to climate change, we are sure that the book will be widely read and used as a reference by a wide range of stakeholders, government agencies, policymakers, development practitioners, academia, NGO friends, and also not to mention the private sector, as they are engaged in a sustainable and resilient development pathways. Through this book, we hope to continue advance advancing our knowledge and lessons on community-based climate adaptation and resilience building, initiatives in South Asia, and also the mutual learning and sharing opportunities to other developing countries around the world. ICIMOD is also deeply honored to support the open access publication of this book that will provide widely accessible around the world, in terms of public access. So once again, welcome to this very auspicious virtual book launch, I would say. And I would like to express our deep appreciation and deep gratitude to the chief guest, Sir Partha Dasgupta here, distinguished speakers, and many eminent personalities that are present today, and the participants for being with us during this milestone event. Lastly, once again, a very big congratulations to the editors and authors of this book and the SANDEE team and network, a very vibrant network. And we are very, very proud at ICIMOD to host SANDEE and the network of our friends here. Thank you very much. Back to you, Priya.
Thank you so much, Basantaji, for that wonderful welcome. I will now ask Partha to step in and offer his opening address.
Well, thank you very much. It is a real pleasure and an honor to be with you, and I'll make clear why it is both in about 10 minutes of talking. Priya asked me and Mani asked me to speak, obviously, of Carl, but I want to say that speaking about Carl cannot be done without speaking about SANDEE. So I'm going to try and blend the two together. I first met Carl in 1979 in Nairobi at a meeting of UNEP, and we became friends pretty fast, very quickly. But for the first decade, we didn't do much work together. We communicated with each other and sent each other our works, but we never worked together until we were asked by Lal Javardena, who was then director, the late Lal Javardena, who was at that time director of WIDER, the World Institute for Development Economics Research at Helsinki, to found a program in environmental and resource economics, which we did. And we held a major conference, books were published, but the problem was that WIDER didn't, at that time, the cleavage between development economics, received development economics, the economics of poverty, and what SANDEE is concerned with, this amalgamation of that in embedding poverty in the natural environment, was something new and it wasn't going to be taken further up. SANDEE effectively was born, I like to think, on a day where I first met Priya in a lift going up the building of the MacArthur Foundation. I had been invited by the MacArthur Foundation because of a misunderstanding of what they had read in a preface of mine, and I was asked if I needed some money for my own research. And I said, I don't, because I've never had research funds and I didn't need it. I'm a theorist. But I had this hope that shared with Carl-Johan Mehler, whom they hadn't actually heard of at that time, and that we would a teaching and research program in the world's poorer parts of the world. Well, Priya can fill in all the details because she was extremely instrumental in making that happen at that end, and enabling us to be awarded a substantial fund of money, which I decided it ought to really be channeled through the Bayer Institute, because that's where Carl was director, and I was director of nothing. I was just a professor here. But it also made sense, obvious sense. And so we began a teaching and research program rather haphazardly because there was an undefined subject. It is really remarkable that even as late as 1994, 95, we didn't quite know where we were heading. It was very incoherent at that time. By 1999, we had gathered enough self-confidence, and with further funds from various sources that you are more familiar with than I am, aid agencies, we established SANDEE. And then, of course, in parallel, the publication, the journal, Environmental and Development Economics. Now, Carl-Johan Mehler was larger than life. He was an outstandingly good economist. I mean, far greater than meets the eye if you just look at his publications. He was an old-style scholar, an old-style scientist. He loved teaching. That's what he liked. And it didn't matter whether the student was me, or whether it was a young researcher, or whether it was a 10-year-old son of one of his colleagues. He would use the same language, same precision, same insistence on honesty and rigor, and take and admonish, no matter what the age is, for getting things wrong. So if it's a 10-year-old, he would say the same thing as he would to a 50-year-old for getting something wrong. This honesty is something which is so rare. It is, I mean, it's an exceptional feature of his character, and you've all experienced it. His writings were very precise, very precise. His real specialty was in duality theory, in demand analysis. And I like to think that association with me broadened his interests. But of course, he absorbed it very fast and ran with it and got SANDEE to follow. The collaboration he and I had, also in research, is amongst the best I've ever had with anybody in the academic field. We are very fond of each other. We both like social life, that work and play and conversation have to go together. Work without conversation is no work, and conversation without work is triviality. So there was gossip even while we were working, as you all know, a lot of banter. And a kind of banter which is absent today, where we could insult each other in public, mock insult, of course, regarding our backgrounds. So he would say, of course, you haven't developed very much, have you, in India? And I would say, well, when we were writing the Mahabharata, you were swinging by the trees. And you've heard of those, and initially it used to be shocking to you, but that's the spirit of real friendship. He died last year after some illness. But before he became ill, we discussed SANDEE, and his pride in it was absolutely total. I don't believe he has ever told you that he was proud of you, but he told me. What has SANDEE actually achieved? And I like to spend the next 3 minutes or 4 minutes mentioning the 3 books, ending with the current one, the one which we're honoring today, Climate Change and Community Resilience. And here is what I think SANDEE has achieved, and it is momentous. And I want to say this to you because I don't largely to make you realize how good you are. I can say that at my age without seeming presumptuous. And it is this. In a very famous essay, the novelist Raymond Chandler wrote, and the essay was called The Simple Act of Murder. And Chandler was a thriller writer, as you know, of great originality. And he was praising, making a homage to Dashiell Hammett for having introduced a kind of writing which was very disparate from murder mysteries of the kind that you read in Agatha Christie and so forth. And he used the expression, he says, Hammett took murder out of the flower vase and put it on the sidewalk. And what SANDEE has done is the corresponding thing with humanity's place in nature. Environmental and resource economics, as it existed until you started work on your 3 books, had all the facets of a rich person looking at an amenity. And at the same time, there was a discovery that communities exist. And it was a joyous view of communities that they solve problems that markets can't. And of course, that's absolutely true, that's for sure. But the idea was, in some sense, there was a glory of communities, that it got things right. What SANDEE has done in each of these cases to have questioned it and shown empirically why we have to be a lot more careful. In the Kati Jodha Mukhopadhyay book, 2008, Promise, Trust, and Evaluation and Evolution, which was alluded to, you showed how unintended consequences of actions can ruin communitarian institutions. I think that was a momentous piece of work. And I've used the findings in it repeatedly in my writings, in particular in the Dasgupta review, as you may have noticed. So in some sense, it again rearranged our conception. That book rearranged our conception of the ability of any institution, never mind communitarian institutions, for being able to set things right. In the Haq, Murthy, Shamsu, in their book of 2011, Environmental Evaluation in South Asia, I found it to be absolutely first-rate stuff. Why? Because it shifted the evaluation problem away from asking people, by the way, how much are you willing to pay, to looking at the productivity of ecosystems, productivity of communities of organisms, and thereby try and tease out the accounting prices. Well, that's exactly how people live in poor societies. A fisherman regards the fishing ground as a capital asset and really treats it like a business person, although he won't call himself that. So does a forester, and so forth. So again, the attention shifted in these books from the way received economics was tackling it and bringing it down to earth in the lives of the world's poor. And the latest book that we are celebrating here goes that same route. How do communities adjust, accommodate? And probably, I haven't read all the essays, my guess is there will be mishaps in it too. That is, how did they make mistakes? This is, I think, a remarkable achievement. And I want to conclude by saying really that do bear in mind that I'm saying something that I've written a lot about. That is to say, I've praised you in my own writings, and in the Dasgupta review that came out in February, you will find, if you go into the index, huge numbers of your own essays reflected there. And I borrowed the findings as illustrations of the kinds of problems that on a daily basis people face. So I like to think that it is SANDEE's contribution, which I think is absolutely towering now, and I'm not being sentimental here. It's towering because it has done what Chandler claimed Hammett had done. It's taken nature away from a precious element into something very basic. It of course remains precious, but it remains precious because without it, we're dead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Partha. Always inspiring and such a champion for the intellectual work that comes from SANDEE. Thank you very much. We will now move on. If you have questions for Sir Partha or for Basantaji, please put them in the chat, not the chat, the Q&A, and we will pick them up. But we will now move on to our panel. We have a very good panel from reflecting interests from across South Asia. And I will not introduce them because their names and affiliations are all in the agenda. But I would like to invite them to join and make their comments. Professor Nishat, Ainun Nishat, are you here? I can't see everybody, so forgive me for asking, but I want to make sure if Ainun is not here, then we'll move on to the, can somebody tell me if Ainun
Nishat? Here. Yeah, he is here. Okay. But I don't, now he is unmuted. Okay.
Okay, so Ainun Nishat, I wonder if the organizers could make sure that all the panelists have their videos on, if they have them off, so we can see the panelists with their videos on and we know who they are. There you go. Dr. Nishat, it's been a long time, but my pleasure to invite you to make your comments about the book in about 5 minutes. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Excellent.
Good afternoon. And Priya, I'm glad to see you maybe after 10 or 15 years. And yeah, it's a long time. Even though Enam and I live quite close together, but we hardly meet. because he is always busy, and to Dr. Partha Dasgupta. And if non-Bengali speaking persons were not here, I would have started talking to him in Bangla. Anyway, so first is an honor for me to be invited to talk on this book. I got a copy and I tried to go through some of the papers. 29 papers, around 300 pages, very valuable articles, talking about the local issues, how the people are coping or what the people are doing. I love them. I would use them, I would read them. Because currently I am the team leader which is producing the NAP document for government of Bangladesh. And one of the objectives for asking all countries of the world to produce or develop their own national adaptation plan is to develop a global standard for adaptation. For mitigation, when you fix up the temperature rise to 1.5 or 2 degrees, currently under Paris Agreement, it is 2 degrees, but this in November, next month, there will be big fight to lower it formally, officially to 1.5. And luckily, USA is going to lead on this. European Union is supportive of that, but this fight was started long back in 2009 by Nasheed of Maldives and Prime Minister Hasina of Bangladesh, and supported by a few other countries. So with the temperature limit, the global standard on mitigation is fixed, but on adaptation, there is no standard. As for example, Bangladesh coastal belt has 5-degree height dike, whereas Sri Lanka doesn't have any dike. Even in parts of Bangladesh like Nijum Deep, where maybe 500,000 people live, there is no dike, and they are at the mercy of storm surge and cyclone. Now, that takes me to my first major point, which is the projections of IPCC. You know, the negotiations are held in 2 angles, the political and the technical. And politics is core, and which we debate a lot. But we do not debate much about the technical side, which is the IPCC process. IPCC produces 4 reports at the interval of 5, 6, 7 years. The first report is on science, which has just come out in August. The 6th report. The second report is on adaptation, will come out in April, March or April. Third is on mitigation, which would be in May. But the 4th is the most important one, which is a summary for policymakers, which would come out possibly around 2nd week of September 2022. And I can forecast the global debate on climate change would take a totally new dimension, because the projections of IPCC 6 are very much different from the previous 5 projections. IPCC 1, 2, 3 were at the beginning, and they say most probably, very likely, climate change is going to happen. Only in IPCC 4, 2007, and 5, 2014, they confirm that climate change is happening due to anthropogenic reason. The climate change, the greenhouse gases are produced by human beings. But IPCC 6 projects, as I said, just 2 weeks back, 4 weeks back, differently. So as for example, for Bangladesh or India or Sri Lanka or Maldives, the projection for storm surge and cyclone are much greater. They have warned we may face category 4 to category 5 cyclone. Bangladesh has never faced category 4 cyclone. India, last few cyclones like Amphan was possibly close to category 5. USA is facing category 5. The last cyclone that had hit in Louisiana and came up to New York, that was category 5. So if you are talking about resilience of the local community, since Bangladesh had cyclone shelters and the dikes, the community managed it with a little bit of support of the government. But now we need to have a stronger infrastructure. Otherwise, the community's resilience would fly away through the window. The second point, the IPCC 6 meeting says there will be short duration heavy rainfall. Think about what is happening in Bangladesh right today. Today, on 22nd December 2021, all of a sudden there has been unusually heavy rainfall in Sikkim. Gangtok experienced around 300 millimeters of rainfall, and Darjeeling and in Bangladesh. The Tista River showed 2 days back a water level that was never seen before. So if we are talking about local resilience and the resilience of the local people, we must alert them about the peculiarity of the climatic behavior. And
Dr.
my next
Nishat,
point would be,
Dr.
1 minute.
Nishat, sorry, yeah, but no more. I think you're overshot, so yeah.
Okay. So my point is, if there was a trend in the various parameters of climatic change, we could adjust, improve our resilience. But it is erratic. Like Bangladesh, this year is a drought year for Bangladesh, not a flood year. And when flood occurs, food security is gone, like in 2017. So while the community is definitely working towards adjusting, towards facing the adverse impacts of climate change, is not that very simple. My last statement, Priya, would be,
I'm going to, yeah. I promise to ask you a question about this if we have time. How about that? Thank you. So let's move on to, I think the next person is Joyshri. Joyshri.
Hi. This is an immense pleasure, no doubt about it. But what I feel is that this book is a major contribution, because in the face of unprecedented human action-induced climate changes in climate parameters, a commonly asked question is the human system resilient? Which means if it has the capacity to deal with the changes and continues to develop. In the literature, it is well established that such capacity is extremely context-specific. While IPCC conducts an assessment of existing literature, it finds extremely difficult task to balance literature available from developed country context compared to the developing countries. So I think this volume is extremely important from that point of view and will be widely used for representing case studies from the region. And while I was reading through the 8 India-specific studies, I find extremely powerful messages based on the line of thinking which Professor Dasgupta and Professor Mailer started inculcating to local researchers of this region to think around genuine investment framework by keeping track of investments in natural capital, human capital, physical capital, knowledge capital, and social capital. I echo Priya's statement that reading through the chapters, one feels positive because the volume puts people at the center. Chapter 4, through a systematic review, shows what can build resilience through preventive action like crop diversification, drought, flood, tolerant seeds, altering crop calendar, crop choice, water management options, soil conservation techniques, etc. And they are all based on the case studies. It rightly summarizes the need for climate service information and climate services like climate information provision and role of social norms, nudge-like intervention for overcoming status quo bias, uncertainty, and future discounting behavior among the farmers. Rest 7 studies are specific case studies, and chapter 10 tells us, based on success and failure stories, the message that the role of state is unsatisfactory so far for slow onset events, which need long-term planning. And compared to extreme immediate disaster-like events, and societal role in collective action with state support has led to build resilience through investment in natural capital stock like soil quality enhancement. Chapter 10, drivers of change for accelerated adoption of modern cooking fuel-based technology adoption is basically showing how a community focuses on human capital building like female education, male labor force participation, and availability of traditional fuel sources, and how one can shift to the modern cooking fuel, which gives less dependence on nature-dependent basic need. And research on value of nature in provision of regulatory service is less available in the literature, but chapter 17 shows annualized storm protection value of a mangrove hectare is twice the land price of cleared forests, and more than 20 times the annual return from alternative land use clearly is a justification why investing in mangroves for storm protection enhances resilience. The role of climate services preventive action is increasingly recognized in climate change research. Chapter 18 shows the value of seasonal climate forecast information for the benefit of smallholders of the region. And urban informal sector and role of women-led institutions in preventive action, behavior and social practice for basic needs like water, sanitation, and how it connects to the state for strengthening social capital for resilience building is rightly pointed out by taking example from Western India. And in chapter 26, we find how education for youths in Sundarban reiterates the role of human capital building to enhance capacity to adapt through nature independent livelihood security. So I think the SANDEE has again proved that what Mailer and Partha Dasgupta could start in South Asia under the coordinatorship of Priya has rightly contributed to the literature, and this will be immensely helpful to the larger global assessments. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayashree. That was a very useful survey to get us really into the book. I would like to now call on our colleague from the Maldives is not well and has begged to be excused. So Wasima is not going to be here. So Mahesh Ji, Dr. Banskota, pleasure to see you with us again. Would love to listen to you.
Priya. Thank you very much. Greetings from Kathmandu to everybody. I feel very honored to be invited to say a few words in this book launching and dedicated event. Moving on to the issue of climate change in Nepal, it has been ranked the 11th most vulnerable country. I just read a recent report, which again says it's now the 4th most vulnerable. So depending on which one you read, you get the number keeps on getting higher and higher for Nepal. Yeah? The future projection of climate trends for Nepal is alarming. The number of days with heavy precipitation is increasing with extensive flood devastations almost annually these past few years. With heavy rains, massive landslides and debris flows have been increasing with heavy loss of human lives and other resources. Climate-fueled disasters are the #1 driver of internal displacement, increasing migration, severe disruption of traditional agriculture, and a growing threat to low-lying urban settlements. The government of Nepal has initiated a number of NAPAs and LAPAs programs to enhance the technical and institutional capacity of different sectors in order to minimize the vulnerability and improve the resilience of the population. Important as these are, they are insufficient to cope with the multidimensional impact of extreme weather events all over the country. Large-scale community responses and adaptations are urgently needed to move in tandem with government efforts. Indigenous knowledge and indigenous and local knowledge supported community adaptations have played an important role in the past in addressing local problems related with climate change and climate variability. But will they be effective in addressing today's climate change impacts? The most important challenge for Nepal will be the capacity for effective institutional response, both locally and nationally, from the government and from the community, and from national and international stakeholders. As always, in times of crisis, coping capacity is the least among the marginalized, the poor, and those living in highly fragile zones. In the past, government response to crisis in remote parts and particularly fragile areas has been delayed, weak, disorganized, and inadequate. For strengthening community-based adaptations to be applied effectively, effectively, a number of issues I think are important and need further discussion. First, a national institution dedicated to critically examining the knowledge and practices of community adaptations is needed, just as the present volume launched today is a good example of the type. But I think we need more in terms of the other types of issues involved. Applying vulnerability assessment and adaptation planning models that use indigenous knowledge and practices need to be developed. Stronger national support for community-based adaptations to climate change is necessary. And I think one of the most important questions is how to scale up best local practices of community adaptations that are mainly localized and context-specific today. Thank you very much. I'll stop it.
Thank you, Dr. Banskota. Some very, very useful suggestions. And we can move on from Nepal to Pakistan. Rehana, very, very nice to see you again, and would love to hear your thoughts on what needs to be done.
Thank you very much. It's good to see all of you here after a long time. And thank you for inviting me. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for inviting me. This is an important time, and particularly looking at that you are honoring Karl Goran, and the whole team of SANDEE is there to honor him. Karl Goran, what I will say is what I observe about him is that he was a giant among all the intellectual and so the particularly intellectuals among the environmental economists, and who had to give, who has given us so much. And I was thinking maybe that the next generations will be missing, but they can benefit from his writings and all that. So thank you very much for inviting me for this. And this is based on this one, I'll say that writing this book for him is an excellent idea. And this is an excellent book. It covers, for the community resilience point of view, covers a lot of dimensions in South Asian region, which is most vulnerable in all the globally, if you see that. And Pakistan is also among the more vulnerable countries. The book is highlighting all the efforts, the initiatives and actions taken at the grassroots level, and particularly like the way it is summarized in chapter 2 is that who are the actors, who are the enablers, and what are the actions taken, and what the kind of strategies that have been adopted. If you look into it, each and every country has the same set of actors and actions and strategies, but they differ in terms of the actions they take. Enablers are the same across countries, but actions and how do they indigenize their actions, that differs. And that gives us this, I think, has given the authors, and I really congratulate the authors also for doing this. It's a commendable job. Then in the end, they say that it's a coverage of issues is excellent, and but in the end, they are forced to conclude that given the multidimensionality of vulnerability and the issues, it is difficult to draw a standard solution for all the countries, even for the South Asian. I think if we just go at the micro level, even for a country having different zones, particularly with reference to agriculture, even within a country, it would be difficult to draw common lessons there. What we can do is this in terms of when I was reading it, I think there's a lot of emphasis on linking these climate change actions and communities with the SDG goals, which is a must. I think this is important. There's a lot of literature is coming out on that. What we can say is that in case of, I was trying to relate what is Pakistan's experience and how Pakistan can gain whatever is presented in this excellent book. The experience of Pakistan in this book is like summarized in 2 chapters. That is basically agriculture. Chapter is saying that Pakistan focusing on agriculture, and it is focusing on different issues. But there are a lot of other studies which are here in Pakistan which are saying that not only that in northern areas, each and every particular area has different issues and they have to deal with them. Some of them are suggesting shifting the dates of harvesting and sowing and particularly then harvesting also. Then crop mix has to be changed, crop variety has to be changed, then you have to do the expenditure management for that. And the book is also highlighting these issues very clearly, that these are important. Similarly, we have a lot of, I like chapter 3, and after this, a couple of chapters, other chapters, which are important for us. Chapter 3 particularly, where you're highlighting the experience of what you can say is you have experience of Philippines, Thailand, and Ethiopia. The variety of diversity of their experiences and diversity of the solutions they have. And maybe what we can do is particularly, let's say, if sometimes we have, Pakistan also does face some drought-like situations. The GRAD problem, the GRAD strategy, which has been opted by Ethiopia, may work very well. But we do also have flooding problem, and this flooding is increasing, and then in that case, the Bangladesh's experience, Indian experience, and can be very valuable for all the countries, including Pakistan also. And then also you have a lot of issues, like you have also touched in this energy issue, then urbanization issue. The energy issue is definitely for Pakistan, you must all know, that is so critical these days. Every time, like after a couple of months, the energy prices are going up and they're creating problems for an average citizen. So what you have is the energy solutions. We are going for solar. Definitely, we're focusing on solar and LPG, and then also we have for the urbanization. We are also going for the urbanization code also, not only for the informal sector, but for the formal sector building codes. So they make the buildings, new buildings, whether the individuals are making or these things, they are more climate friendly. Because right now we use so much glass in it without taking into account the rising temperature. So if you do that, building codes are critically important. And the second thing is early warning system. The book is also highlighting, and in the early warning system, I think the extension workers can play a very critical role in there, because extension workers can provide the individual level information at the distance level, but we have to enable them. That is the critical issue for Pakistan. And then the next issue, which is not so much highlighted here, is the glacier melting. As a result, the communities are suffering. And after that, how these, I should not say opportunities, the communities have suffered, but they have been converted into some tourism opportunities for the benefit. But the thing is, when the glacier melting is happening, and it is happening very widely as the temperature is going up. So we have to look into it, what kind of solutions we can provide, or what the solutions, because this sometimes it is sudden. Like Adabad lake incident was not like that was a gradual melting and all that. It happened, and the community suffered because of that. But after that, this lake is providing a lot of tourism opportunities from that. So all these issues
Rehana,
be integrated. That's this last sentence.
Okay.
Okay, I know this is like, so all these opportunities combined, the community is definitely important, but the macro level agents have to support them. Without their support and meaningful support, it will be difficult to achieve. Thank you very much, Priya.
Thank you, Rehana. Important last words on this, on your particular remarks. Moving on to my friend Lucy Emerton. Please.
Thanks so much, Priya. Lovely to see many old friends and new friends, and some very old friends. Some people, some black hair at the start of SANDEE has now turned completely grey, or in some cases, not to mention any names, disappeared altogether. So how lovely to see you all. And I'm personally thrilled to see this book. I've glanced through all of it, although not read every word of the many chapters. And I've got to say, the collection of papers is phenomenal. And what I've learned about the adaptation innovations that are taking place across South Asia It's, to me, what is particularly refreshing, you know, in addition to the extremely high academic and technical quality of the papers, is it's a publication. I mean, both Partha and Priya emphasize this, and it's shone out to me. It also focuses firmly on the very practical level. You know, it looks at the responses to climate adaptation, and it explicitly shows a view from the ground level. That bringing things down to earth, to me, makes this a really exceptional publication. All of the chapters are wonderful, but I'm speaking from Colombo. So let me just comment that the 3 chapters on Sri Lanka, which I did read word for word, really gave a lot of pause for thought. You know, as we reflect on the current situation here, in an island nation that's already extremely vulnerable to the ravages of climate change. And these have been brought into stark relief by the current COVID-induced economic crisis, which is hitting everything from the livelihood to the macroeconomic level. And to me, that's a core part of the book's take-home message. You know, how do we prepare and respond and adapt to this layering of shocks and stresses that we're currently seeing, which climate change underpins and exacerbates, but is layered with multiple other compounding factors, which are just going to intensify in the future. And I think the book provides some real guidance. A major point to me is the importance of ecosystems in all of this, the rich natural infrastructure that we've got in the region, the fact that any response from the community level or other has to build on and invest in this natural infrastructure and the people who are a key part of the ecosystems. And I think there's a very compelling case for this that the chapters make, and a demonstrable economic return to investing in these community-based solutions, nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation. You know, the 3 chapters from Sri Lanka, restoring small tanks, dealing with on-farm erosion in a watershed, networking and farmer agro-ecosystem management practices, all of these give really important information. And I think this is one of the many great contributions the book makes to help to make this case, to raise awareness and to demonstrate concrete mechanism and experience. How do we invest in the ecosystems, human and natural, which provide this resilience and adaptation now and into the future? And as the multiple stresses and shocks layer each other and compound and make this kind of resilience and adaptation even more necessary. So I think it can do a really great job to make this compelling and much needed case to other scientists, but also to decision makers and politicians, a really important target audience. And all credit to the authors for spanning this very wide target audience. So well done, SANDEE, well done, authors, as usual. And I hope that this is just the start, the first in many such publications. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy, especially for making note and highlighting, reminding all of us that climate change is part of a larger set of conditions that communities are constantly coping with, the shocks that they're trying to attend to. So our very last panelist is Professor David Orr. I understand we owe a special thanks to Oberlin College, and I would like to invite Professor Orr to make his comments.
Well, thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here with all of you, and particularly on this occasion. This is a remarkable thing you've done. In a very short period of time, you pulled together a remarkable book in the middle of a pandemic, and it is the achievement plus the wonderful quality of the book. So congratulations to all of the 59 or 60 authors and to the 4 editors. It must have been a little bit like, as they say, herding cats to get 59 authors into a wonderful book in such a short period of time. The second thing I'd like to say is a word of appreciation to my colleague and friend and fellow professor at Oberlin, Rumi Shaman. Is, at the risk of embarrassing him, Rumi is really a remarkable person. Not only that, he is also a very good administrator. So Rumi, thank you for your wonderful role here at Oberlin. And a third congratulations I'd like to give, and Sir Partha, thank you so much for the description of the work of SANDEE. I'm new to SANDEE, but I'm awed by what it has done and eager to know more and read more of its work. As for the book, let me say several things that elaborate a little bit on what's already been said. We've entered what one writer has called a long emergency. Carbon stays and other heat-trapping gases stay in the atmosphere for many years. So 1,000 years or farther out, we will still be experiencing the surge of carbon that we put into the atmosphere in the past century and a half. So this is not a short period of time, and for the storms and the crises that we see all around the world, this isn't how it's going to be. This is only how it is at the beginning of this long emergency of many centuries duration. So the work that underscores the work, I think, of all the authors in this book and of SANDEE in particular, the rebuilding of society at the community scale is critically important. We've seen over the past 50 years the inability of government to solve the issues of climate change relative to or commensurate to the scale of the problem. The first warning in the case of the United States, the first warning was given to a US president about impending climate crisis in 1965. And we still have no legally binding climate policy. So this is going to be a long emergency. The second great virtue of this book is to focus on practical activities that can happen at the community scale. And I think as I read through the parts of the book that I have read, I was struck with how applicable they are to every part of the world, whether in South Asia or in the United States or Europe. It doesn't make much difference. What the authors are describing are changes that we must make virtually everywhere. The last thing I'd like to say is this. In the work of all of you involved in ecological economics, I think three lessons come through very clearly. One is for the arguments that we cannot afford to make changes that we describe as sustainable development or resilient development. We can't afford not to. We pay for sustainable development whether we get it or not. We pay in lost opportunity, we pay in war, we pay in all kind of human misery, but we pay sooner or later. So there's no way not to pay. And ecological economics, I think, has been very accurately focused on those facts. Secondly, there really are very few accidents or anomalies from an ecological perspective world. What we see rather is the playing out of the rules of the system. And if you start with the rules of economic growth, or what is called neoliberalism, changing climate becomes kind of logical, and injustice does as well, and war does also. So these are the workings out of the system. The last thing I would say is this, and in the book that I've read and in the writings of all of you that work in the field of ecological economics, there is a focus on whole systems that I find totally compelling, not just for economics, but for politics and for all society, but to see the wholeness of what we're dealing with. And the word whole is similar in English to holism and to holy. It's linguistically connected to other things beyond simply economics, but it embeds our livelihood into larger patterns. So let me say in closing what a wonderful piece of work this is, and how applicable I think it is to virtually every part of the world, because of the changes in government are slow and difficult. but changes at the local scale are practical. They deal with human needs of food and health and livelihood where people most need them. And so let me close again with thank you to all of you, the 60 or so involved in this project, to the work of SANDEE, and also to my colleague, Rumi Shaman.
Thank you very much, Professor Orr. Very good to hear your outside perspective, but you should know that once you are at one of our events, you're a Sandeeite automatically. So consider yourself a member, as many others have come to recognize. You just get caught.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, everybody, for keeping time. I've really enjoyed listening to all the different perspectives from the different countries. And it's been quite insightful. So let's start with the Q&A. I'm looking at the questions in the chat, not in the chat, I'm sorry, in the Q&A box. And I'm going to try to filter through them a little bit. And Dr. Ainun Nishat, I'm going to offer you the first chance to respond, because I apologize for cutting you short. But here are some questions, and I'll raise a couple maybe. Partha, this is for you, and it's a broader question, and let's wait for you to come back to this, Partha, so I'll get to some of the others first. But it's a broader question about banter and collegiality within academia, and what to do with the loss of this type of collegiality, and what the implications of this are, and how do we bring this back? Could you reflect on it? But before we get to that, there are questions. There's a question here about climate change being such a cross-border environmental problem, but how our countries in our region, but this is certainly true for the world, are unable to cooperate, and what we can do to push our states to cooperate better. And if there are strategies for this. This is a big question. We've been grappling with it. ICIMOD is perhaps very well placed to answer this question, but I would like to get Dr. Nishat to give it a shot, and then maybe somebody from ICIMOD, if they want to, Basantaji or anybody else who may want to answer. How do you make the states cooperate on these transboundary issues? You have 1 minute, very quick responses, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Currently, I am deeply engaged in developing the national adaptation plan for Bangladesh. And I'm a bit lost with the slogan type of statements that are given to us, that we must have it a country-driven, a gender-sensitive. It should be based on community-based approach. It should be based on ecosystem-based approach. Now, this is what my problem is. The point I was trying to make earlier, communities' role, communities' resilience must be improved. But unless it is supported by, if this community role is set bottom up, we need to mix it up with the top down and the horizontal forces. Forecasts are very poor. The infrastructure that has to be built, adaptation, has to be done by the state. So the resilience is excellent. This would be the main approach for planning for adaptation. LAPA or NAPA or whatever you do, you have to have support of the state in building up the necessary facilities for the communities to respond to the adverse impacts of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nishat. Would somebody, Basantaji or anybody else, would you like to try and address this issue of how do we get the states in our region to better cooperate? Have we been successful? Are there strategies that we can use?
These are, thank you, Priya.
Tough question.
Yeah. Perhaps from ICIMOD angle, and also being a regional intergovernmental organization, bringing together these different member countries, and as a knowledge organization, how do we really promote evidence-based solutions to devise integrated and innovative solutions. So we have taken an instance in terms of different climate change adaptation and resilience building program at the regional level. Any project that we formulate, we involve more than one country so that it also provides opportunities for mutual sharing and exchange between the countries. At the same time, also it brings coordination and cooperation between the different stakeholders and so forth. For instance, that we are working on a climate change adaptation on agriculture sector in terms of climate smart agriculture, looking at some of the local solutions in terms of adaptation on the farming system. Likewise, we are also looking at some of the issues on nature-based solution on spring set management. Having said this, there are good practices that are promoted in Nepal that is also percolated in Bhutan and also percolated in India and so forth. So I think we are looking at more from the regional kind of a sense in terms of implementing our climate change adaptation and resilience building program that fosters some sort of a cooperation among the regional member countries. And having said this, I think there is a bigger need in terms of looking at the strategic level in terms of fostering regional cooperation. And one big step from ICIMOD point of view is a HIMAP report and SK's call to action, where we see this climate change adaptation and also the call to action at the regional level, at the national level, and also local level. So this is a long journey in terms of looking at the strategy and the implementation on that part. And things like publication like this and the knowledge thus generated like this, I think provides a doorway and an entry point for cooperation as such.
Yes. Thank you, Basantaji. And to reinforce what David Orr just said, the state does not have all the solutions, and it is very hard to have the state respond all the time. And part of what, SANDEE's very presence is because we think that people-to-people cooperation is essential for getting the states to come together. I mean, this is exactly one response to take it to the next, before the sort of this kind of national level integration happens. I see hands up for David Orr and Rumi Shamin. Is this in relation to the specific question? Would you like to respond to the specific question? Okay,
yes,
Rumi, go first. Yeah.
Yeah, it is in response to the specific question. Very quickly, I think one example that involves Dr. Nishat is the Joint River Commission Bangladesh and India had, and many years of negotiations about water sharing between the two countries. And I know that Dr. Nishat has publications on that. Gives us examples of ways countries in South Asia can use a formal process to cooperate and coordinate between them.
David, did you want to respond to this issue? Your hand is up. You have to unmute yourself, please.
I said I didn't. I accidentally put something on.
Okay,
but
then,
I would say this. I would say this. I think climate change worldwide, looking at all cultures everywhere, is a challenge to how we do the public business and how much of that is done by market forces, at what level it's done. But this is a challenge that will grow with increasing urgency over coming decades. Again, this is a long emergency, and the major challenge is how we do the public business, whether it's by government or governance at national levels, global levels, and local levels. And I've just put the emphasis on the political aspect of this, but thanks for the chance to say that.
Yeah, thank you, David. Partha, there are a couple of questions for you, and I won't send them all your way. But in addition to that question about how do you create these intellectual communities that are more collegial, there's a specific question on the role of accounting, ecosystem accounting, and how can that help formulate better policies for climate change adaptation and community resilience in South Asia. Would you like to reflect on accounting, Partha? And whether that has a role in
It's very,
adaptation.
that's a very tough question, largely because I mean it's answerable in bits and pieces and lots of illustrations. My review goes into it at great length. You need an accounting in the sense that at the first cut, you need an inventory of what you've got, whether it's a country, whether it's a community. Households do it. Households have an inventory of furniture they own and they have, and crockeries and cutleries and so forth. And the idea is not very dissimilar here. We are looking at ecosystems which are capital goods. So you need an account for that. And next is, of course, the productivity of these ecosystems. So I think taking the analogy from produced capital goods and human capital, produced capital in particular, is exactly right, because it tells you the direction in which you have to move. Now, climate change has been, in some sense, a misleading metaphor for our engagement with nature, because there is a simple metric, concentration, translated into climate, which is a much more complicated thing. But you work backwards and you say, well, I've got one thing we want to measure, which is concentration. And you can translate it in 1.5 or 2 degrees or whatever. But the idea is something that you can have leverage over. You can't do that in general, in the kind of context that this latest book is studying, because although it's climate, the point isn't about how to halt climate, it's the communities adapting to it. So you need to look at the structure, the inventory of stocks of capital you've got, which is best meets the demands. So I think basically one of the things that we really need to have is a lot more engagement between ecologists and economists. This is something that I think the Bear Institute has been attempting to do and has attempted very successfully, I think. We need to do that because we need to have some understanding of the productivity of ecosystems. And certainly the Hakpurti Shamsunder volume was a terrific attempt at doing that. And if you look at that with the valuation exercises in books coming out from the United States, for example, there is a gulf of a difference. One really illuminates, the other is minor issues of how to protect a landscape and how much money you're willing to pay for it. So I think I'm not too worried about it, so long as we grapple with the problem in the way we would with anything else, like industrial development or agricultural development or whatever. The first question that was asked, which is a much more broader question and it's hard to know, I don't really have an answer to that. I think SANDEE is just a very good miniature of the collegiality that you are seeking. And so if you can somehow have a project with colleagues somehow and then get money for that, that really helps. But of course, at the individual level, I've collaborated a lot. Most of my publications have been collaborative ones, but they were not funded by anybody in particular. It was just two people getting together and then working on a paper. I think the problem that is raised is important, is extremely important, because there's a huge competitive element now in economics and has been gathering force in a big way. In some ways, my own experience with SANDEE has been, one reason I'm so committed to SANDEE is that it really is a counterweight to that. And much of my work is really with people like yourselves, as opposed to outside. And my review, in some deep sense, reflects it, because a book reflects what's built on, what it is built on. And if you look at the Dasgupta review, you'll find it's very, very different from the environmental and resource economics that has come to us from the West, if you like. And it wasn't a conscious decision. It happened because I evolved with you all. And I think so the collegiality is extremely important. I couldn't agree with you, but there's no formula for creating it. It's like asking, how do I make friends? It happens.
I do think Partha Karl had a formula, it was deep intellectual discussions over a glass of wine and having to stand up and sing once in a while.
That's right.
And that evens the playing field.
That's absolutely true. That's true. That is absolutely true. Okay.
Yeah, and I think we learned a lot from that model in SANDEE, in the sense that we really wanted to have intellectual conversations, but build deep friendships along the way. And we saw that kind of social capital as being essential. So, and that's why you see it sustain itself under Mani's leadership, fabulous leadership right now. So anyway, thank you for that question. I have a question that Sadamini asks, and I think this is for anybody who would like to answer this. Based on recent flood experiences in India, particularly Kerala, there are numerous reports that people just build back. Communities are not learning. And this is not a new phenomena. And this is part of what Ainun is referring to, that communities go back and do exactly what they were doing previously. So the learning is somewhat slow, or they don't have alternatives. So they go back to what they would have done previously. How do we address this problem of behavior change being so slow? And I it's a very big question, and it's not. People talk about behavior change as it being behavior change, but it really depends on what is available for communities to undertake the next steps they need to adapt, right? And so that's a big part of it. If you do not provide them the kind of infrastructure and support to change their behaviors, they're not likely to change their behaviors because they face all kinds of risks and limited returns to actions, right? The returns to what they have to do are so limited that they will do what they know best to do. But I shouldn't speak to this. I would like to open it up to anybody else who wants to respond to this question. Any panelists or the authors of the book would like to respond to this question? All right, let's move on from that to a very specific question to David Orr, I think. And we will likely come to the end of this discussion session after the response by David. And so I would just like to alert Sarah, who I understand is in the audience, to see if you would have some comments to make, Sarah. But before that, Professor Orr, you mentioned how the logic of certain economic development models make climate change inevitable. Is it time to take a serious look at the concept of degrowth? Not a small question.
The concept of which now? I didn't hear that.
Degrowth.
Oh, degrowth.
How do you take growth out of some of these other considerations?
Is there an easier question I could answer?
I'm sorry, I looked around and I fished that one out.
Well, I think if you start with the rules of a system, there's a certain, I wouldn't use the word inevitable, but there's a certain predictability about what comes out of it. So if you start with the rules of neoliberalism, as it grew out of Friedrich Hayek's work and Milton Friedman's work in the United States, there's a certain inevitability, especially if the growth that they wanted to pursue was fueled by fossil fuels. Then climate change, species extinction, and a high degree of injustice becomes, if not inevitable, certainly quite likely. Degrowth raises a related but a little bit trickier question. There's some things that need to grow in the world. There's some things that need to shrink in the world. And the balance between those, I think, would be, I would simply respond by very simply, and this is straying into Sir Partha's terrain, but I would prefer to see an economic system that required full cost pricing and prices that tell the truth about what they do in the world. And the point is to have a system that causes no ugliness, human or ecological, at somewhere else or some later time. So whether that amounts to growth or degrowth, I wouldn't say, but I think it's a complicated question. I would start though with the whole issue of prices and make sure that as much as we're able, they do tell the truth about the true cost in the world.
Thank you, David. I'm going to pose a question to all the panelists to see if you have very quick responses to this question. This is an area that we inevitably will have to continue to work on. This is about the future, and so SANDEE will continue to do more work in this area. So if you had a wish list, dear panelists, what do you think SANDEE should be doing more of in this broad area? What is one question that you would like SANDEE to pick up and run with from your country's perspective or from your own perspective? Quick answers to that. But before I ask you to do that, you have 30 seconds to think about it. I would like to invite our dear friend, Sarah Anier, economist and spouse to Karl-Johan Mahler, to offer some of her own thoughts and reflections. Sarah, are you able to come on video so we can see your face?
I mean, now in video.
Yes, Sarah, very good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. And of course, you were going to join us, but very, very happy to see you this evening, morning. Please.
Of course, I had to be here. I'm here as Karl-Johan spouse, and it has been very moving. The whole session, just to see Partha, who I haven't seen for years now, it was, and also see all the friends. I think Karl-Johan is always with us, with me, and today he's more alive than never. SANDEE is a gem, a jewel, a diamond, and he was always very proud of it. He was always with SANDEE in his heart and in his work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. It fills our hearts to see you in Carl's absence. So thank you very much. So panelists, before we go to Dr. Ram Manohar Reddy for closing remarks, I offer you the opportunity to tell SANDEE what to do next. Let me call upon, I'm going to call upon, Joyshi is not here. Rehana, are you there? Would you like to have your wish list? What's on your mind? Is Rehana not there either?
Yeah, she also said she had to
drop
go.
off.
So.
All right, very good. So Mahesh Banskota, Dr. Banskota, are you here? Sorry, people seem to have dropped off. I'm not sure. Is he here? If not, we will go to Lucy Emerton. Lucy, are you here? I see. We have a lot of Dr. Nishat, I'm sure you have some suggestions for SANDEE. And I'm going to call on Partha Basanta ji. And if the organizers can tell me who else is around, I'm happy
and
to
David also.
David, yes. Dr. Nishat.
My terms of community has to be enhanced. The communities have their own mechanism how they're facing the climate change. But the erratic nature of climatic behavior is so strong that unless the communities are assisted, they will be lost very soon. There should be advanced forecast and warning so that the people can be prepared. There should be stronger infrastructure so that they can base their adaptive approach based on those infrastructure. There is need for technological breakthrough, as for example, seeds that can support drought or other things. So I'm a bit tired on slogan type cliches, community-based adaptation, gender-based adaptation, ecosystem-based adaptation. I have to draft the national plan for Bangladesh. I'm lost because I cannot find measures. We do it. It's so erratic. You can establish everything is important. and there are contradictory things. So while I congratulate the authors for putting up these excellent papers that would be very useful for planners, but at the same time, I want them to broaden their horizon so that they come out with an concrete and approach for adaptation, because the problem of adaptation is going to be serious. The global rise of temperature is predicted around 3 degrees. I will not be there for 50 years, but when it exceeds 2 degrees, maybe around 2050, I cannot anticipate or see from literature what is going to happen. Food security would be the main point. Migration would be serious. So a lot of issues. Priya, I can pick up my discussion with Enam and give my ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what you're saying is that this is really a challenging and very serious intellectual endeavor. And so we really need to go beyond sort of looking at these sloganeering type suggestions and deconstruct that to really understand what works and what doesn't work. And that's the type of challenge that SANDEE absolutely needs to be taking very seriously. So thank you for that. Let's see, who else is here? Partha, do you want to add to sort of a set of suggestions that SANDEE can pick up?
Yeah, well, it's hard for me, impossible for me to suggest what you should do, but I want to pick up a memory of Carl that sort of influences me greatly. I suggested to you he was a giant of an economist, unarguably one of the great economists of my generation, and always picked on problems which were doable, or at least he thought was doable, which for many people was not doable, but nevertheless. I want to relate it to what Professor Orr ended with in his last remark, and I think it's exactly right. I think the way to think, he used the word prices, I would use the word perhaps getting the institutions right to meet the fact that so many prices are missing, so many markets are missing, quote unquote. It doesn't have to be markets, but some. And I'll come up with the rather banal suggestion, if you like, but it's just what Carl would have liked, and I certainly would like, and it's also what SANDEE is very good at. It's a challenge to the WTO. Here's the fact. We've been sold the idea that free trade is a good thing. Trade expansion is a good thing. But if you have missing markets, it's not at all clear it's a good thing for the country who is exporting. The country which exports primary products, and typically poorer countries do that because they're sitting in the tropics, and that's where the action is in terms of their primary goods. Every time you export, there are these negative externalities through the facts of extraction or harvesting of the stuff, which SANDEE is so expert in. And when you export it, you're selling it at a price which is below social cost, because you're not compensating those who are being harmed, say downstream farmers for upstream deforestation. So the export price of timber, it falls below the price cost of production, taking nature into account. Which means what? Which means, related to the way I approached in my review, it means there's a wealth transfer from poor countries to rich countries every time you expand exports. It's a direct implication of the fact that a whole bunch of prices are missing. So, but on the other hand, this is a theoretical prediction I made many years ago, but I have no idea what the magnitude is. There's tons of work that can be done on a case-by-case basis to tease out. And of course, the Hakmurthy Shamsunder volume gives you the exact entry point for that, because that's exactly what it was doing, but it didn't put it in the context of exports and imports. And I think that's a huge, you could open up a whole area of research.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Partha. I think taking what we know at the micro level and then trying to address that empirically, looking at macro changes, a very useful suggestion. We do less of that in SANDEE, sort of the macro level stuff. So that's good. David, and then last word will go to Basanta ji from ICIMOD. So David, do you have any suggestions based on what you've just heard? Or
well, I'm not part of SANDEE, but I guess I'm part of the family now. But it's presumptive to say anything. But I was trained in political science, international law, and governments And so one of the questions I would have for Sandy is, what do you need or what do you want from the national government? So to allow the local things to occur that are described in this wonderful book, what has to happen in law and regulation and the constitutional arrangements at the national level? What do you need? So if you could describe that, I think that would help begin to see the whole picture of a national economy in a global world.
Thank you, David. Basanta Shreshtaji from ICIMOD, do you have any suggestions from your internal perspective?
I'll be brief. Perhaps I would tend to think the climate financing is a big topic, big area. And if you look at around adaptation and resilience building, there is a huge shortfall. And also, if you look at the geographic region in terms of the climate investment, if you look at South Asia, perhaps, and also if you look at from the mountain perspective, there is a large degree of a marginalization in terms of flow of investment, climate investment in this part of the region. So I think perhaps Sandy also could look into, the climate financing, different opportunities, innovative financing instruments, and also with the private sectors, with a net zero target, with a lot of multinational companies that in ICIMOD that we have had some discussion, but to bring about this awareness and to bring about the whole economics angle of climate financing, whether it is a nature-based solutions or ecosystem restoration, reforestation. So there are many different areas, renewable energy and many other sectors. So perhaps climate financing would be one big topic in the coming future, and also to attract investment from the different stakeholders. I think that would be my opinion.
Thank you, Basantji. I think you've also pointed to another gap. I think the economists, and Sandy has done this, do a lot about pricing and identifying the values of different goods and services for which there are no markets, but we don't take it forward, the next step, to figure out how that financing can actually be realized, and that it's a whole different set of issues and considerations. And I think that would be very useful from a policy perspective. So thank you so very much. I now have the pleasure of thanking all the panelists for their really very useful remarks, and going to the last speaker, Ram Manohar Reddy, whom I used to know as the editor of the Economic and Political Weekly, which, as all of you know, has perhaps been more important than any other publication across the Hindi history of pre-India and maybe across South Asia for intellectual discourse in the region. So it's my great pleasure to invite Ram Manohar Reddy for final words on this issue.
Yeah, thank you, Priya. It's been a fascinating hour and more listening to the discussion. And I'm, of course, in a sense, an outsider. I'm not a practicing economist, nor am I a practicing ecologist. But I am someone who's interested in these issues. And yes, both at EPW and later, I've tried to understand developments in ecological economics. And of course, as a citizen of the world, we are all concerned now about climate change. Now, the discussions, I would just like to very briefly, and the other thing, Priya, I would like to congratulate you for keeping time. This, as you know, is one thing that in South Asia we are not great at. So I will try to also be brief and keep to time, but thank you for that. The first thing is that, during the course of the past hour, we have got a sense of the richness of this volume. It's really incredible that the editors have done this, working with 50 authors during the pandemic, got together and published this volume within 2 years. That's really something, and that's come through. And I would like to add my congratulations to that. Secondly, the speakers itself, we have got a flavor of not just the country-wise issues on climate change and community resilience, but also the differences on the ground, differences between sectors, differences between countries. And there's been some focus, I'll come to that a little later, on the need for capacity building. I think that was one common strain among more than 2-3 speakers from different countries. The other thing was that it was interesting. It didn't come out in the presentations, but if you look at the volume, of course, much of the work on community resilience has always been on agriculture and the rural areas. But the book itself has, I think, one section, about 5-6 chapters on the urban sector. And I think that is something, as we know that South Asia increasingly becomes an urban society, the pressures are going to appear over there and not just in the coastal areas. So that section on urban South Asia with chapters on Nepal, Bangladesh and India was something that important, and I'm mentioning it here because it didn't really come up in the discussion. Then the last two parts of the book are both on alternative livelihoods and of course the most important one, moving forward. Taken together, I think the book will, not just for economists, members of SANDEE, but for policymakers, will play a role. And here I would like to kind of draw out, there's so much was discussed in the past hour. If I could draw out three strands. One, of course, was the need for greater capacity building. That was mentioned by almost all speakers, and the need for capacity building on the ground. And there, in that connection, and that's the second point, that the need for cooperation across countries of South Asia, and cooperation which draws the support of states. I think that was also highlighted. That is something that, in the absence of this support, their groups have tended to seek cooperation across South Asia, and unfortunately in a region where there isn't much state-to-state cooperation, it is good to see this people-to-people or voluntary organization-to-voluntary organization cooperation. But as one speaker, talked about, I think it was Professor Shameen, he said that, he pointed to the work of the River Water Commission between India and Bangladesh on the Ganga, I would presume, that that was something that as a way forward. So these three aspects on the need for capacity, cooperation, and to draw on support from the states, I think these are, to my mind, messages that we could take away from this discussion. I'm sure the book has much more in it. And finally, you're asking speakers to take a wish list. I do think two points. One, if you look at the book itself, there is a lot of rich micro level work, and that's what I think SANDEE has been very good at. Perhaps it is time now, as I think Professor Partha Dasgupta said, that to start engaging with macro level work, to draw from these experiences, to not so much to build a larger theory, but to move beyond the micro to the macro. And finally, as you mentioned, that the getting into the area of climate financing. These are, in the end, these are 2 points that came out. But on the whole, I mean, as somebody, as I said, who's not really part of SANDEE, but has seen SANDEE, and yes, as you mentioned, I was very happy when at EPW to publish many articles by members of SANDEE to listen into this discussion. I think this is a volume which would have a wider resonance to a wider audience, and not just for economists who are interested in environmental economics. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. Very good way to close. I just, since we have a few more minutes, and I'm going to actually give everybody 5 more minutes back to their lives, but I see that Lucy Emerton has come back to us after averting a major flood somewhere. So I will give her an opportunity to reflect on this last question. If you had a wish list, what would you like SANDEE to do in terms of the next set of questions, research agenda? What would your wish list look like?
Just to say the flood had nothing to do with climate change, but it did require some community-based adaptation. It unfortunately involved an exploding water heater. Anyway, now temporarily stemmed. I mean, SANDEE has so much to contribute, and my wish list is so huge. But I think, you know, this ball that you've started rolling by looking at community level approaches and responses and needs, please don't let it go. Please keep on snowballing with it. And I think two really critical things, keeping on with the same theme and target audience and building it in this, is the whole governance aspect, but also the whole investment aspect. What kind of approaches can work to mobilize investment for communities to strengthen resilience to climate change, but also to support those grassroots level adaptation approaches and particularly nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based adaptation? I think that's a key one, and it combines the more researchy academic side with the very practical conclusions and sort of transformative change that SANDEE researchers do so well.
Thank you, Lucy. And I think, thank you all very much. I would like to end with a hearty congratulations to the editors. I don't know if you can all come on your camera and we can do the Zoom clap, you know, for the editors. There you go. Please, let's congratulate the editors. Fabulous volume. Hey, you've got a lot of work ahead of you, so don't rest on your glories. Keep on going. And do you want to say anything more? For editors, where are you? I see all of you. Would you like to have the last word? But your work is not ended.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say that thank you, Priya, for your amazing moderation of the event.
You know, when I say it's family, they told me yesterday that I was moderating it. They had asked me to speak for 5 minutes and suddenly I'm moderating the whole session. Did you just forget to tell me till 24 hours ago? So here you go. But thank you. Great job, everybody. And thank you, ICIMOD, for your continued support. Yes, thank you so very much. Bye-bye. Can we close, Mani, or do you have anything?
Yeah, I would like to thank everybody for joining today, and all the panelists, speakers, and Priya, great moderation. Sir Partha, good to see you, and your wise, guidance and words and everything for us, and all the participants who put questions and who gave us good words, for encouraging words, all kind of things. So thank you very much for your presence today.